and halving violence against women and girls.
Senate Secretary Mims-Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's working women who will pay the price for Labour's budget of broken promises, with employers' national insurance making working people worse off and affecting childcare settings. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation says single-parent families 80% are headed by women, on average, will be £1,000 worse off by October 2029. Has the Secretary of State assessed what additional negative impact to the labour market the hidden scrapping of reforms to child benefit changes to single-parent households will be, as they've been described by Martin Lewis as unfair and a penalty to single-parent households?
Mr. Speaker, we are committed to transforming the lives of women across our country, and that applies to single parents too. I'm leading the Child Poverty Task Force with my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Unlike the last government, we are committed to making sure we drive down the number of children growing up in poverty. They left a shocking record where it came to rising levels of child poverty, and this government will turn it around.
We go over to topicals. Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to draw the House's attention to Islamophobia Awareness Month. No one in our country should be targeted because of their faith or race, and British Muslims are a crucial part of Britain's history and of our society. More widely, the Office for Equality and Opportunity is already making great strides. The new Employment Rights Bill will legislate for a stronger duty to prevent sexual harassment, and action plans will cover the gender pay gap and menopause issues. And we will open a consultation on extending pay gap reporting and equal pay rights to ethnic minority and disabled people.
Daniel Francis.
The disability charity Sense estimate 200,000 disabled children across the UK are struggling to get the right school support, given funding issues and a need to employ more multi-sensory impairment teachers to ensure deaf-blind children can access education. Can I therefore ask the Minister what steps she's taking to ensure disabled children are represented in the forthcoming Children's Wellbeing Bill?
My honourable friend champions the rights of disabled children. He is right to do so, because the system that we have at the moment, where it comes for support for children with special educational needs and disabilities, just isn't working. And the recent report from the National Audit Office showed that all too clearly. I'm determined, Mr. Speaker, to listen to parents, experts, charities and others to make sure that we reform the system to provide more timely intervention and support for children and families, and make sure that all children in our country are able to thrive.
Secretary Claire Coutinho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honoured to take on this role, and I should pay tribute to my predecessor, who will next be at this dispatch box. The Equalities Brief underpins values that I cherish: fairness, freedom, meritocracy and equality under the law. I believe people should be judged by the content of their character, not the colour of their skin or any other identity characteristic. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that equality is not about group identities or placing one section of society on a platform above another, but about individual freedom and responsibilities?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the right honourable lady to her place. I do look forward to working with her on areas where we can agree and where we can take such concerns forward on a cross-party basis wherever possible. I believe that she, like me, is passionate about tackling violence against women and girls too. And absolutely, in terms of what she sets out, I believe that everyone in our country should have the chance to achieve all that they are capable. And our mission across government is to make sure that where you're from doesn't determine what you can go on to achieve.
Coutinho.
In the election, the Conservative Party committed to clarifying the definition of sex in the Equality Act 2010 to protect women's rights. At the end of this month, For Women Scotland versus Scottish ministers will be heard on the UK Supreme Court. This case will have far-reaching consequences for sex-based rights. So can the government assure the House that it's now clear that the definition of sex in the Equality Act 2010 means biological sex?
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable lady will appreciate that I won't comment on ongoing cases, but what I can be clear to her about is that the Equality Act 2010 does set out that providers, for example, have the right to restrict access to service on the basis of biological sex. This government is proud of our achievements in legislating for the Equality Act. We will make sure that providers can continue to support single-sex exemptions, and it is important that providers have clarity in this area, and I'd be happy to work with her to make sure that that is the case.
The picture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask if the Minister will have discussions with the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government on how pavement design and layout can be improved to enhance navigability for the blind and visually impaired people?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is a very good example of the kind of discussion we need amongst ministers responsible for disability across government. Department of Transport guidance on inclusive mobility and on tactile paving services does advise how design and layout can inform visually impaired people, including about hazards and directions, and I'm happy to pursue the subject further with him.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The voluntary organisation's disability group represents over 100 charities, including MENCAP and SENSE, and they've said the budget will have life-changing consequences. The CEO has said the Labour government is letting them down. They're talking about the NICS increase that will put risk to frontline services. So what is the government going to do to mitigate this case for those charities when they're so important for disabilities?
I can say to the honourable gentleman that we're working very closely with disability organisations, and I pay tribute to the work of those that he's referred to. And we're certainly going to be making sure that barriers that too often confront disabled people get removed by this government. And that's the mission that we're on.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to...
We like you that much.
According to the Darcy report, there has been a substantial decline in the social determinants of health, such as poor quality housing, access to clean air and good nutrition. How is the Minister working with Cabinet colleagues to include health in policies which address these social determinants of health and tackle the health inequalities and the legacy of the Conservative government left for this country to deal with?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend who brings real expertise to the House in this area. We are committed to tackling the social determinants of health across government and to tackle the stark health inequalities that sadly blight the life chances of too many across our country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During a hospital stay, my constituent, a new mother with an exclusively breastfed infant, encountered resistance from staff when trying to keep her child with her. The distress caused left her needing PTSD therapy. What steps is the Minister taking with government colleagues to ensure hospitals support breastfeeding mothers appropriately?
The Honourable Lady raises an important point, and I'm very sorry to hear about her constituents' experience. I will make sure that a Health Minister picks up on that point and has a conversation with her, because, of course, new mothers, including those who are breastfeeding, absolutely deserve the right level of support and advice.
Debbie Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Australia, Canada, Germany and the Netherlands have called upon Afghanistan to cease what the countries say are violations of the UN Convention of the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. This is the precursor before action up to the ICJ. Will the UK be joining them?
Mr. Speaker, please forgive me, I didn't quite hear all of the Honourable Lady's question, but I will make sure that the issue she identifies is picked up with the relevant Minister and that she receives a full response.
That completes questions. Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, Roberta. Before I come to Prime Minister's questions, I wish to welcome our special guest who is observing our proceedings today, His Excellency, the Speaker of the Somali House of the People. Your Excellency, you're more welcome. Let us move to Prime Minister's questions. Christine Jardine.
Question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday I was honoured to join President Macron to mark Armistice Day in Paris, and together we paid tribute to the fallen of the First World War and all subsequent conflicts who made the ultimate sacrifice for the freedom that we enjoy today. Mr. Speaker, I also attended the COP summit. My focus, as ever, was on British energy security and the jobs of the future that should be with these shores, central issues of concern to people in this country. It is also Islamophobia Awareness Month,
and I reaffirm our commitment to standing against discrimination and racism in all its forms. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Christine Jolly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the 2 weeks since the budget, I've been contacted by several GP practices in my constituency of Edinburgh West, including my own, I should say, with their genuine fears that the impact of the changes to National Insurance employers' contribution will threaten their ability to continue to offer the public the health service at the standard they do at the moment. And they are far from the only ones struggling, particularly in the health and social care sectors. So can the Prime Minister tell me, or perhaps he and his Chancellor would like to come to my constituency and explain to those GPs, to charities and others, how they are meant to cope without extra support from the government?
Look, Mr. Speaker, what I would say is this: because of the tough decisions that we took, we have put forward a budget with an extra, Mr. Speaker, an extra £25.6 billion for the NHS and for social care. That includes an increase to carers allowance and £600 million available to deal with the pressures of adult social care. We will ensure that GP practices have the resources that we need, and the funding arrangements between the NHS and contractors will be set out in the usual way.
Lord Hatton.
Mr. Speaker, members have raised their concerns with a range of damaging policies pursued by the Leader of the Opposition. This includes voting against critical investment for our NHS, stating that maternity pay is excessive and the minimum wage a burden, and even backing harmful fracking when last in government. So is the Prime Minister aware of any attempt by the Leader of the Opposition to justify these dangerous positions which would cause untold damage to communities like mine in South Dorset?
This government has given millions of people a pay rise of £1,400 by boosting the minimum wage. We've strengthened parental leave with better rights for parents, got huge investment into our schools and NHS, and all of that whilst ensuring that pay slips of working people have not been affected. It's clear whose side we're on, the working people of this country. Now, I haven't heard the Leader of the Opposition clarify why she opposes all these things, but now is her chance.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister can plant as many questions as is like with his backbenchers, but at the end of the day, I'm the one he has to face at the dispatch box. And I welcome him, Mr. Speaker. I welcome him back from... Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister back from his trip to Azerbaijan, where he has unilaterally made commitments that will make life more experienced for everyone back home. Speaking of making life...
Somebody's suggesting reading. I think if you notice, the Prime Minister also reads. So please get your Leader of the Opposition.
And, Mr. Speaker, I can pre-prepare my questions, but he needs to answer from his mind. Yes. Speaking of making life...
Responsible for the answers.
So he has made life more expensive with his unilateral commitments, but speaking of making life more expensive, will the Prime Minister confirm that he will keep the cap on council tax?
Mr. Speaker, she talks of the trip to COP. I'm very proud of the fact that we're restoring leadership on climate to this country, to the UK, because that will be measured in lower bills on energy independence and the jobs of the future. And in relation, and she may have missed, but on Monday I was very pleased to announce a huge order into jobs in Hull for blades for offshore wind. If she's opposed to that sort of action, she should go to Hull and say so. On the question of council, she knows what the arrangements are.
I think the House would have heard that the Prime Minister could neither confirm nor deny whether there was a cap in council tax was being raised. So I will ask him this question. How much extra does he expect local authorities will have to raise to cover the social care funding gap created by the Chancellor's budget and increases in employers' NI? He told the member for Edinburgh West just now that he was covering social care. How much extra does he expect local authorities to raise?
It's all very well, this knockabout, but not actually listening to what I said 3 minutes ago. It's a bit of a fundamental failure of the Leader of the Opposition. I just said £600 million. I repeat it, £600 million.
That he has repeated that number because he has probably not listened to the Labour-run LGA, who said that with no separate funding for the Chancellor's budget announcements, care providers will likely see increased costs, which will cost councils more, and all of the £600 in grant increase he is giving will not cover what is required for adult social care. It is clear that they had not thought through the impact of the budget, and this is the problem with having a copy-and-paste Chancellor. Did they not realise that care homes, GP surgeries, children's nurseries, hospices, and even charities have to pay employers' NI?
We have put more money into local authorities than they did in 14 years. They left them in an absolutely catastrophic state. We produced a budget which does not increase tax on working people, nothing in the payslip, investing in our NHS, investing in our schools so every child can go as far as their talent will take them, investing in the houses of the future. If she's against those things, she should say so.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not against any of those things. But, of course not. None of us are against any of those things. But he has confirmed that he does not know what is going on. The Prime Minister probably does not realise that on Monday, the Ministry for Communities, Local Government and Housing revealed that councils will need to find an additional £2.4 billion in council tax next year. That's a lot more than £600 million. I know that he's been away, but did the Deputy Prime Minister, who runs that department, make him aware of their £2.4 billion black hole?
So let me get this straight, Mr. Speaker. She doesn't want any of the measures in the budget, but she wants all the benefits. So the Magic Money Tree is back after 2 weeks in office. 2 weeks in office. They've learned absolutely nothing. We've put forward a budget which takes the difficult decisions, fixing the £22 billion black hole that they left, investing in the future of our country. They say they want all of that, but they don't know how they're going to pay for it. Same old Tories.
Mr. Speaker, even he has to admit that they fiddled the fiscal rules. The OBR has actually said that they don't recognise where the additional growth is going to come from. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the rise in employers' national insurance is going to be a disaster for small businesses around the country. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you about Kelly. For over 20 years, Kelly has run an after-school club business supporting 500 children and families in her borough. In 2024, her national insurance cost was about £10,000. In April, this will rise to £26,000. That is a 150% increase in costs from the budget alone. What is the Prime Minister's message to Kelly and the 500 families her small business supports if it goes under?
I would say this to Kelly. We inherited a very badly damaged economy. We inherited a £22 billion black hole, and we were not prepared to continue with the fiction. We stabilised...
Ms Lopez, I'm sure I couldn't expect better from you as a PPS as well, Prime Minister.
I would say to Kelly, we are fixing the mess that we were left. We're investing in the future of our country. I would also say to her that the Leader of the Opposition, week 2, wants all the benefits from the budget, but has no way of saying how she's going to pay for it. Same old mistake over and over again.
Mr. Speaker, he has nothing to offer except platitudes. And the fact is that they do not know what they're doing. Their ideological budget was designed to milk the private sector and hope nobody would notice. Now his cabinet ministers are all queuing up for public sector bailouts to his tax mess. If he is going to bail out the public sector, then can he tell us this? Does he think it is appropriate, as the Ministry for Housing has done, to approve a 4-day week for councils that is not flexible working, but is actually part-time work for full-time pay?
Questions based on what we're actually doing are usually better than fantasy questions made up. Mr. Speaker, what did they deliver in 14 years? Low growth, stagnant economy, a disastrous mini-budget, a £22 billion PAC, and now she wants to give me advice on running the economy. I don't want to be rude, but no, thank you very much.
Patrick, yes, you, right at the end, Patrick. So,
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Towns like mine in Southport need investment and support after 14 years of decline from the party opposition. So can the Prime Minister confirm that his budget will provide that much-needed investment for towns like mine, and further confirm that, unlike the previous government, my local authority and the public services that my town relies on will be finally properly supported?
Can I begin by paying tribute to my honourable friend and to his constituents in Southport. They've shown extraordinary courage and resilience as they try to rebuild from the devastating tragedy and loss earlier this year. We will ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the people of Southport are supported now and in the years to come. The budget is designed to fix the crucial services that his constituents rely on, including £1.3 billion of new funding for local government, an investment in safer streets, in our NHS for the future, and that's the direction in which we're taking the country.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to fixing the crisis in the NHS that he's inherited, the Prime Minister has rightly recognised the need to improve access to GPs. But like my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh West, GPs in my constituency are writing to me to tell me how worried they are about the impact of the national insurance hike on patient care. So I listened very carefully to what he said to my honourable friend, but I have to say I hope he can think again. Will he at least exempt GPs, community pharmacists and other health and care providers from this tax rise?
I hear the point he makes and I understand the concern. We have made a huge investment in our NHS, the biggest ever investment in our NHS for many, many years, and certainly almost all the people working in the NHS are very, very pleased to see that investment in them and in their service. On the question of GPs, we will ensure they've got the resources that we need, and the funding arrangements will be set out in the usual way later this year.
Sir Ed Davey.
Speaker, I have to say I think patients and GPs and others listening to answer will want more reassurance and much more quickly. But if I may turn to the war in Ukraine, Mr. Speaker, a senior advisor to President-elect Trump, Donald Trump Jr., has shared a post on Instagram that declares that President Zelensky will soon, within the next few weeks, lose his allowance. If the Trump administration does withdraw support from our brave Ukrainian allies, will the UK and Europe step up to fill the gap? Will he seize frozen Russian assets, not just the interest, but the assets underlying that, so we can fund a huge boost to the Ukrainian forces in their fight against Putin's war machine?
Mr. Speaker, as he knows, we've been resolute and strong in our support for Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression, and I have been speaking, as he will know, in recent weeks with other leaders about how we put Ukraine in the best and strongest possible position at this time, and I'll continue those discussions. Thank you.
David Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Child poverty is a national scandal. In St Helens North, it increased by over 50% under the previous government. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that we need to address this, ideally cross-party? And if so, does he share my concern that the Conservatives have opposed actions we're taking with the budget, employment rights, housing and more, not to mention their leaders' comments on maternity pay, which suggests they just don't get what working families and their children need?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. Under the party opposite, we saw child poverty increase by 700,000. This was a budget that not only invests in our NHS and our schools, but also ensures that working people won't face a penny extra in their pay slips or at the petrol pump. But because it came to tough decisions on tax, we haven't touched national insurance, income tax or VAT, just as we promised on working people. We also gave 3 million of the lowest paid a pay rise, something which the party opposite seems to be opposing. Thank you.
Gavin Robinson.
Prime Minister, Lebanon is in crisis and my constituent Catherine Flanagan is in despair. Her 3-year-old son, David Nally, has been out of her care for the last 2 years. The Belfast High Court has indicated that he should be returned to his mother, and they have issued a bench warrant for the arrest of his father. But when she fled domestic violence in Beirut, she got no help or assistance from the UK Embassy. And when she has sought assistance from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to be returned with her son, to see her son again, and this British citizen come back to the UK, she has not received the assistance that she or I in our community expect she should. Can I ask the Prime Minister to engage in this issue and at the very least ask the Foreign Secretary to assist my constituent in her earnest desire to see her 3-year-old son again?
Can I thank the Right Honourable Member for raising this case and for all that he's doing on behalf of Catherine and David. I hope they get some comfort from knowing they've got an MP working so hard on their behalf. It is, I know, a complex and difficult situation, but of course I will make sure that the relevant meetings are set up with the relevant ministers to ensure that he gets the answers that he needs on behalf of his constituents.
Jacob Collett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituency of Burton and Uttoxeter is the home of UK brewing and has the best pubs in the country. The Prime Minister is welcome to join me for a pint in sampling the very best beer in the world. As this government looks to reform business rates and consult on the changes, will the Prime Minister commit to ensuring that pubs and hospitality have a seat at the table?
Mr. Speaker, last time I went to my honourable friend's constituency, I got to see the fantastic South Derbyshire College. I look forward now to testing his proposition that he has the best pubs in his constituency on some future occasion. But pubs and breweries are such an important part of our culture and of our communities, and that's why the budget delivered an £85 million per year tax cuts for pubs, reducing the duty on a pint. We also delivered a 40% relief on business rates for next year and permanently lowering them for the year after. We're protecting small businesses by more than doubling the employer allowance to £10,500.
Thank you.
In the past week, there have been reports of more schools who are slated for closure as a direct consequence of the Prime Minister's ideologically driven policy to introduce VAT on school fees and increase national insurance contributions. This will be a pattern seen up and down the country and will lead to staff being unemployed and pupils and parents being cast adrift. Will the Prime Minister do the decent thing and abandon this policy and apologise to those affected?
I do understand the concerns of those that save to send their children to private school because they believe in aspiration and opportunity. What I would say is that every single parent shares that aspiration and opportunity, whichever school they send them to. Under the last government, we didn't have enough teachers in basic subjects in our state secondary schools. They were prepared to tolerate that. I'm not.
Mr. Speaker, 3 million people across the country, including an estimated 70,000 in Wales, will benefit from Labour's budget measures on the minimum wage and the national living wage. Contrast that with the Leader of the Opposition, who said minimum wage was hurting businesses, or the Shadow Chancellor, who called minimum wage a burden. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that those comments underline that the Tories have no interest in protecting working people or boosting the income of the lowest paid?
Mr. Speaker, it was the last Labour government that introduced the national minimum wage. In the teeth of opposition from the party opposite, I'm proud that this government has now increased it by over 16%. That means an increase of over £2,500 a year for a full-time worker who are aged 18 to 20. Whether it's our employment rights bills or decisions at the budget, this is a government that is proudly on the side of Britain's working people.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that Sue Gray has remarkably turned down the opportunity to be the Prime Minister's special envoy to the nations, will the Prime Minister now finally admit that it was an invented job on taxpayers' money from one of his cronies? And if it wasn't, is he going to hire a new one?
It wasn't.
Antonia Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I represent loads of hard-working mums and dads in Tipton, Wednesbury and Coseley. Last week, the Leader of the Opposition's campaign chair, Rachel McLean, said it was not the right decision for the Tories to expand childcare provision. Will the Prime Minister confirm that this Labour government believes in supporting working families and will work to get them the childcare they need?
Let me be absolutely clear. This government is committed to making childcare more affordable and accessible. The party opposite voted against making life easier for working families. They've learned absolutely nothing. We're committed to £1.8 billion to expand access across childcare, creating 3,000 new school-based nurseries and family hubs. And I'm proud that we're taking the country in the right direction.
Mr. Speaker, Article 2 of the United Nations Genocide Convention makes it explicitly clear that genocide is not about numbers, it's about intent. And the intent of the Israeli government and the IDF has been explicitly clear in words and in actions over the past 400 days. More than 45,000 innocent men, women and children killed. On the 28th of October, the Foreign Secretary denied that a genocide was even taking place and suggested that the Israeli army had not yet killed enough Palestinians to constitute a genocide. And last week, the PMQs, the Prime Minister started that he has never referred to the atrocities happening in Gaza as a genocide. Will the Prime Minister share his definition of genocide with this House, and will he state what further action he is prepared to take to save lives of desperate and starving men, women and children, given that we now hold the presidency of the United Nations Security Council?
It would be wise to start a question like that by reference to what happened in October of last year. I'm well aware of the definition of genocide, and that is why I've never described this and referred to it as genocide.
Katie White.
Mr. Speaker, my constituent's daughter, Bethany Ray Fields, was brutally murdered by her ex-boyfriend in 2019, despite raising multiple alarms of this abuse of the police. Bethany's mother, Pauline, travelled down to Parliament this week to bring her case to the Minister. Does the Prime Minister agree with Pauline that more needs to be done to shift the culture towards believing and reacting fast to victims when they sound the alarm of concern as one way to reduce violence against women and girls?
What happened to Bethany is appalling. My thoughts, as I'm sure the whole House, is with her families. We do need a culture shift here, and we have committed to halving violence against women and girls in a decade. No government has ever made that commitment before. I hope that can be something which is shared across the House, because this is so important, and it starts with that central question of belief and confidence. For every woman or young woman who comes forward, there are probably about 9 who never have the confidence to come forward, and that starts with belief and the culture that we put in place, and we're committed to that. And I invite the whole House to join us on that mission to halve violence against women and girls.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Prime Minister and the whole House would wish to congratulate Donald Trump on his landslide victory last week.
Is that hold on. I will hear the question. Nigel.
Thank you. But within a couple of days, we'd learned of a third assassination attempt Charges have been laid, and behind it are Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Has the time not come, Prime Minister, to prescribe what is so obviously a terrorist organisation, and in doing so, not just do the right thing, but maybe mend some fences between this government and the incoming presidency of Donald Trump's, given that the whole of his cabinet have been so rude about him over the last few years?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see the honourable member making a rare appearance back here in Britain. He spent so much time in America recently. I was half expecting to see him on the immigration statistics when we see the next batch. But he may have missed. I did congratulate the incoming president last week. And we will work with him. The point he makes about Iran is a very serious point, and we will work across the House and with our allies on it. Obviously, on question of prescription, we keep them under review. Thank you.
Afzal Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's recognition of Islamophobia Awareness Month and his commitment to supporting Muslim communities. The APPG on British Muslims' definition of Islamophobia is one of the most widely accepted definitions on this issue, and I have been discussing the adoption of it with the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Faith, and the Leader of the House. Given recent riots and doubling of Islamophobic hate crimes over the last decade, can the Prime Minister outline the steps this government will take to tackle this issue and commit to ensuring a clear and effective definition of Islamophobia?
Well, I thank him for raising this important issue. Whatever the hatred, there has been a rise in the last 12 months or so, and I think the whole House will join in saying we must meet any rise in hatred in whatever form it is, including Islamophobia. We are working with others to take this forward, and I'm happy to meet with him further on that.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was in South Lochaber at the weekend speaking to pensioners who still cannot understand why the Prime Minister chose to take away their winter fuel payment. And one of them remembered from just 2 years ago the then Leader of the Opposition saying, "Looking ahead to winter is frightening. I've met pensioners who have no idea how they'll heat their home." And she asked me to ask you, Prime Minister, whatever happened to that guy?
Mr. Speaker, as he knows from previous answers, we've taken tough decisions in this budget to deal with the situation that we faced. Because of that, we've stabilised the economy, which means we can commit to the triple lock. Because of the triple lock, pensioners will be better off. But I'll take no lectures from his party about running the economy. Their record in Scotland is terrible.
Juliet Kendall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the establishment of a Flood Resilience Task Force because in my constituency of Broxtowe there has been unprecedented flooding that has affected many of my constituents. There's rising concern and significant financial insecurity for many who face distress, trauma and fear in their own homes. May I ask the Prime Minister what other measures he's taking to improve flood resilience and support that will be available to my residents and my constituents in Broxtowe?
I do know the dreadful impact that flooding has had on her constituency, including with Storm Henk earlier this year. The last government left flood defences in the worst condition on record. We are investing £2.4 billion in flood resilience over the next 2 years, and we've launched a flood resilience task force to coordinate national and local flood preparation to better protect communities and our economy. Rather than heckling, they might take a reflection on the record that they left.
James McMurdoch.
Mr. Speaker, the residents of my constituency in South Basildon and East Thurrock are facing a triple whammy of increased council tax of 50%, reduced public services and a borrowing on £1 billion worth of emergency funding, which is 1% above base. That 1% is £10 million approximately per year that's going to the Treasury that could be spent on frontline services in Thurrock. Will the Prime Minister commit to reducing that rate so the money can go where it belongs?
Well, I thank him for his question. The last government made life even more difficult for councils needing exceptional financial support by charging a premium on borrowing. That was the wrong decision, which had a huge impact on vital services, and we will be taking a different approach. We're delivering in real terms increase on core public, on government spending power, and that will benefit his constituents.
Sir John Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition took time at her party's conference to say that a little bit of adversity in life is good for people's mental health. That approach clearly did not work for the 2 million people who are stuck on mental health waiting lists because of the last Tory government. Can the Prime Minister commit to tackling mental health waits in the NHS?
I think we've obviously recognised the devastating impact that mental health problems have on people's livelihoods, and Lord Darcy's report showed that waiting lists are far too long, and there's a shocking decline in mental health in children under the last government. Giving mental health the attention it needs, we're doing by recruiting 8,500 mental health workers, much needed, and of course reforming the Mental Health Act, which in my view is long overdue.
Alex Blower.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chalk stream rivers are rare with a unique ecology. Most of them are in the UK and 2 are in my constituency of North East Hampshire. Last year, chalk stream rivers were hit with 14,000 hours of sewage discharges, and the previous government did nothing despite calls from my honourable friend, the MP for Chesham and Amersham. Will the Prime Minister introduce a special protection for our chalk stream rivers?
Well, I thank her for raising this, and we are committed to protection and restoration of unique chalk streams. She's right, the destruction of our waterways should never have been allowed, and we've announced immediate action to end this disgraceful behaviour. New powers with tougher penalties, including fines, banning bonuses and bringing criminal charges against those who persistently break the law. We've also launched a water commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's leadership on an international scale to smash the criminal gangs that smuggle people across the border. This Labour government having returned over 9,000 people with no right to be in the UK, which is 20% more than the party opposite. Will the Prime Minister confirm that he will continue this trade and smash the gangs that profit from people's misery?
Yes, the last government lost control of our borders. And in the first 6 months of this year, small bite arrivals were up 18% on the same period last year. They spent £700 million on returning, 4 volunteers to Rwanda. Since coming into office, we've returned 9,400 people with no right to be here. They talked about getting the flights off. We've got the flights off, including the single biggest deportation flight. And so that's why we're investing another £75 million in smashing the gangs. We're absolutely determined to have a serious response to a serious question, not a gimmick that achieved absolutely nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ensuring every child has access to a great education, I'm sure, is a priority for all across this House, and I welcome the announcements for extra funding for children with SEND at the budget. The Chancellor, in her speech, announced a £2.3 billion increase in core spending and £1 billion for SEN. However, the budget document states that they are, in fact, both from the same pot, announced twice. Which is correct?
The Chancellor made this absolutely clear in the budget. Putting that huge investment into special educational needs, it's an issue that is of concern across this House, because I think all members are recognising the appalling record of the last government. It's been raised from his own benches, the appalling state of SEN. So I'm very proud of the money that this government is putting in where the last government failed.
Mr. Speaker, there's not a week that goes by where my office isn't contacted by young people and their families who are being let down by the shocking state of SEND provision locally. Across my constituency, I'm trying to work across party lines to push both Central Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire Council to do more. And I welcome the fantastic extra news in the budget about additional funding and subsequent announcements about increased support for mainstream settings. But we know we're going to need to do more. So can the Prime Minister assure my constituents that we won't shy away from the whole system reform needed to finally ensure every young person has the support they need to thrive in school?
No, we won't shy away from that challenge because it's far too important for the children and the families and the communities involved, and therefore we will not only put the necessary money in, but we will look at the reform that is needed alongside the investment, and we will finally fix the problem, another of the problems that we've inherited from the lot opposite.
Final question, Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 29th of November, this House will be asked to consider at second reading one of the most consequential pieces of legislation to this country's make-up. But I am generally approaching this with an open mind, but have many concerns. And what concerns me, Prime Minister, is the short space of time on that day. So could I ask you, Prime Minister, that before we get to the 29th of November, that the government will make a commitment that we can have 2 days, 16 hours of protected time on the floor of the House in government time, that we can examine and debate in this House the report stage, so that many of the arguments we are concerned about may be able to be brought out then, because otherwise, Prime Minister, people like myself may decline a second reading over fear that we may not get to be able to debate these issues in full.
Well, I'm grateful to him for raising this issue. It is obviously an important issue, an important vote. And I know that there are strongly held views on both sides of the debate across this House, and that's why it will be a free vote. I think every member needs to decide for themselves how they will vote on it. It's a free vote. I do think there's sufficient time allocated to it, but it is an important issue.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's questions. Let the front bench. No punch forward to come after UQ's and statements, which you well know. Right, let us come to the urgent question. Nigel Farage.
To ask the Secretary for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs what the latest update is on the transfer of sovereignty of the Chagos Islands from the United Kingdom to Mauritius.
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. Following 2 years of negotiation under 3 Prime Ministers, on the 3rd of October, this government secured a deal that will protect the secure operation of the UK-US base on Diego Garcia well into the next century. This government inherited a situation where this future was under threat. International courts were reaching judgments on the basis that Mauritius had sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago. International organisations were also taking steps, Mr. Speaker, not to undermine Mauritian sovereignty claims. This was not sustainable. The base, Mr. Speaker, on Diego Garcia plays a critical role in countering an array of threats to regional and international security. Without legal certainty, Mr. Speaker, the base simply cannot operate effectively. Continued uncertainty would be a gift to our adversaries. This is why the agreement has been welcomed by all parts of the US system and by other critical regional security partners, including India. Agreeing this deal now on our terms, Mr. Speaker, means we've been able to secure strong protections that will allow the base to operate as it has done. We've secured a deal that protects our national interests, respects the interests of our partners and upholds the international rule of law. There will be clear commitments, Mr Speaker, in the treaty for robust security arrangements, including preventing the presence of foreign security forces on the outer islands, ensuring that the base can continue to operate securely and effectively. We would not, Mr Speaker, have signed off an agreement that compromised any of our security interests or those of our allies. And this agreement will be underpinned by a financial settlement that is acceptable to both sides and will underpin a strong long-term partnership with Mauritius. This was crucial to securing the agreement, Mr Speaker. This government will not scrimp on our national security. However, I am sure the House will understand, Mr Speaker, that it is not normal practice for the UK to reveal the value of payments for military bases anywhere across the globe, because to do that would put them at risk of their future secure operations. The deal, Mr Speaker, will also deliver benefits for the Chagossian community who were removed from the islands in the 1960s and 1970s. And I know that the whole House have already and will again join with me in expressing regret for that shameful episode. Mauritius will now be able to implement a programme of resettlement to the islands other than Diego Garcia, and we will work together to start a programme of visits for Chagossians to all of the islands. And the UK will finance a new trust fund for Mauritius to support Chagossians and provide additional government support to those living in the UK. All Chagossians will, of course, remain eligible for British citizenship and free to make their homes in the UK. We will work, Mr Speaker, with Mauritius to ensure the continued protection of the island's unique environment, with the shared objective of securing and protecting one of the world's most important marine environments, and this will include the establishment of a Mauritian Marine Protected Area. This agreement, Mr Speaker, also shuts down the possibility of the Indian Ocean being used as a dangerous illegal migration route to the UK, with Mauritius taking responsibility for any future arrivals. Mr Speaker, the long-term protection on the base on Diego Garcia has been the shared UK and US priority throughout. This agreement secures its future. We look forward to engaging with the incoming US administration. I congratulate both President Trump and Dr Ram Gulen on their recent election victories in the US and Mauritius respectively, and we look forward to working with their governments on this. This agreement is in all sides' shared interests and in our national security.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mauritius has no legal or historical claim to the sovereignty of a group of islands that are 1,300 miles away from where it is, nor does, from the International Court, it was purely an advisory opinion. There is no legal reason why we have to do any of this. Now, I warned the Foreign Secretary 6 weeks ago in this chamber that it was an enormous mistake to do this, given that we had a US presidential election coming up on November the 5th. And if you say to me, well, yes, it's okay, the United States are fully in favour, really? I can tell you that the incoming National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, has form on this, right back to when the Right Honourable Member for Braintree was doing his best to give away the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. Indeed, he wrote to Secretary of State Blinken at the time. There is, I can assure you, having been in America last week, knowing also the incoming Defence Secretary very well, there is outright hostility to this deal. Whatever is said about a lease agreement, as we saw with Hong Kong, these agreements can very, very easily be broken. Diego Garcia was described to me by a senior Trump advisor as the most important island on the planet as far as America was concerned. So you're going to find outright hostility. And by the way, when it comes to the Chagossian people, yes, of course, what happened to them was truly awful. They do not wish to live. They're unanimous in this. They do not wish to live under Mauritian rule. They want to live under British rule because they actually trust us. There is no basis for this agreement to continue as it is, and if you do, you'll be at conflict with a country without which we would be defenceless.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm afraid, obviously, I fundamentally disagree with what the honourable gentleman has had to say. Let me be absolutely clear. This government inherited a situation where the long-term secure operation of this crucial military base, he is right on that one point, was under threat. International courts were reaching judgments, international organisations were taking steps not to undermine Mauritian sovereignty, and this threatened the secure and effective operation of the base. And in the absence of a negotiated solution, a legally binding decision against the UK seemed inevitable. This would have threatened the secure and effective operation of the base, and that was not sustainable. I note the comments he makes regarding the incoming US administration. We're looking very forward to working with them, and I'm sure that they will be being briefed on the full detail of this deal. And I am confident, Mr. Speaker, that the details of this arrangement will allay any concerns. We would have not entered into any such arrangement in the first place.
Mr. Francois, I welcome you back to the front bench, but I don't welcome you back to shout from it continuously. Do we understand that we need calm? This is an important debate, so I don't want the rhetoric coming from the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've known the honourable gentleman a long time, and he knows he can come and speak to me at any point. No, absolutely, Mr. Speaker, but he can come and speak to me about these matters at any point. Mr. Speaker, we were very, very clear. The US administration that's incoming, we will be working very closely. We're working closely with the current US administration. This had support across the national security apparatus of the United States. We would never have entered into an arrangement. And indeed, of course, the previous government recognised the threats to the long-term operation of this base, which is why they started the negotiations in the first place. But it was this government that did the deal. Diego Garcia is absolutely important, but it is not at risk. It is more secure as a result of this deal. So what he is suggesting is simply not the case. He mentions the Chagossians. We all agree what happened to them in the past was completely wrong and shameful. That's been agreed on all sides of the House. I've engaged with the Chagossian community on a number of occasions. He will also recognise, Mr. Speaker, that there are a range of views across the Chagossian community, including those who support this deal. But we've made sure that their interests are at the heart of this arrangement, whether it's in the trust fund, whether it's in the unilateral arrangements that we will do, the continued commitments to UK citizenship for Chagossians, and, of course, their ability to return, Mr. Speaker, in terms of visits to all the islands and to a part of a resettlement programme that Mauritius will restart as a part of this treaty. So I am confident this deal is the right thing for our national security, it's the right thing for the Chagossian community, and it's the right thing for our allies and partners.
We heard representations from the Honourable Member for Clacton about upholding international law. Does the Minister agree with me that it is important that the UK fulfils its obligations in international law, and does he recognise, in fact, that in 2021 the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea confirmed that, in fact, Mauritius does have sovereignty over the Chagos Islands, and notwithstanding that this deal does secure the long-term certainty of the base on Diego Garcia?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's absolutely right. Agreeing this deal now on our terms means we've been able to secure protections that will allow the base to operate as it has done into the next century. It settles the historic sovereignty claims in a way that successfully balances our international law obligations with vital UK and US national security requirements.
Welcome, Dame Patel, to the front bench.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the world is a more dangerous place than ever before in our lifetimes, and this government has agreed to give away a key strategic asset in the Indian Ocean, ending more than 200 years of British sovereignty. It is a wrong decision, and we stand by that completely. A month has now gone since the government's announcement, but we're still in the dark about exactly what the government has agreed, and this is simply not acceptable. We have no treaty, and vital questions remain unanswered. That is unacceptable, and the Minister needs to put that right today. We cannot afford for our military base on Diego Garcia to be compromised in this way. So may I ask, what safeguards will be in place to ensure that no other states can establish themselves or place their assets, and in particular strategic assets, on any nearby islands in the archipelago? And how does this decision affect the strategic defence review that is underway right now? How much money will Labour be asking British taxpayers to send to Mauritius each year under this deal, which we don't even know the details of? Which departmental budgets will this come from? What's the total figure? The House expects transparency on this, Mr. Speaker, including about what taxpayers are funding, and we need to hold the government to account on this. So can the Minister please give a cast-iron guarantee that the UK will be able to unilaterally extend the agreement on the military base beyond 99 years, because that's all we've heard for now. What will be the mechanism for doing this? This is a crucial piece of scrutiny that I think we all need to know about, particularly as the Minister has discussed and raised a point about national security, and the national security apparatus in particular agreeing to this arrangement. And what discussions has the Foreign Secretary, who I know is not here today, has personally undertaken with the Chagossian community, who he will know are beyond distraught about this agreement. The elections in Mauritius and the United States, Mr. Speaker, pose further questions, and it's right that we follow up on this. Labour rushed into this deal just before the Mauritian elections, even though ministers surely must have realised a change in government was a strong possibility. Why did they do this? So the minister does need to be clear about this. We want to know how they're going to engage with the new US administration. And Mr. Speaker, this side of the House opposes this government's decision on this, and we intend to hold the government to account.
Mr. Speaker, can I firstly welcome the Shadow Foreign Secretary to a place in this chamber. We were in a committee earlier on today, but I welcome her to a place, and as always, I've had a good engagement with her on issues in the past, but she's right to ask important questions. But I think one of the first things I need to do, Mr. Speaker, is to correct this idea somehow that we are giving up the base. That's exactly the opposite of what we're doing. We're securing the future of the base. The base will continue to operate. It will continue to operate as it has done. She asks an important question about security guarantees in relation to the Outer Islands. This is an important question. There will be clear commitments in the treaty for robust security arrangements, including preventing the presence of foreign security forces on the Outer Islands. We simply would not have signed off an agreement that compromised any of our security interests or those of our allies. And indeed, this has been discussed not just at the political level in the United States, but at a deep technical level. And she will know from her time in government about the nature of the special relationship and the depth of that relationship. And that is why we've only proceeded on the basis that we were all satisfied with these arrangements. And she will be able to scrutinise these in due course, as will the House, Mr. Speaker. The treaty will be presented in the usual way after signature. It will go through the usual process. She asked when. We've, of course, just had the Mauritian election. Of course, we'll be engaging with the new administration there. We'll be seeking to present this for signature, and then we will be presenting the treaty in all its detail to the House. She asked about an extension period, Mr. Speaker. There is a provision in the treaty for an extension period after the 99-year period. And she asked about the Chagossians. Again, I would gently say there are a range of views in the Chagossian community. Those have been expressed to me on a range of occasions, both before I came into government and since I've been in government. There are a range of views on this arrangement. We respect all the different views that are out there. We will continue to engage with the Chagossian community, but I am absolutely clear that there are important provisions in this deal that support the Chagossian community, both their ability to return to the Outer Islands, the visits, the trust fund, the unilateral support we will continue to provide, and of course the fact that Chagossians are welcome to come here to the UK and take up British citizenship, which is an agreement under the previous government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Portsmouth is the home of the Royal Navy, and as the Portsmouth North MP, can I welcome the appointment of Jonathan Powell as the National Security Advisor, who played an important part in negotiating this deal. Does the Minister agree with me that his experience in helping to negotiate the Good Friday Agreement and work on some of the world's most complex conflicts, he is uniquely placed to advise the government on tackling the challenges ahead and to protect the advancements of UK security?
Well, I totally agree with my honourable friend, who I know takes a keen interest in the overseas territories, in particular Gibraltar. For her comments, I totally agree with her about the new National Security Advisor. He's a remarkable individual with a huge track record in government of making deals, of getting things done, which I know is appreciated by our friends on the opposite side of the Atlantic too. And he is somebody who takes the national security of this country extraordinarily seriously. And therefore, I completely agree with her characterisation.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Al Pinkerton.
Mr. Speaker, many Chagossians from all over the country gathered at a rally yesterday where they expressed their concerns about the UK-Mauritius agreement, and we reiterate our concerns here today. The exclusion of the voice of Chagossians is wrong. It cannot be right, and surely no member of this House could think it is acceptable that the Chagossians are denied the opportunity for self-determination. So can I ask the Minister to update the House to confirm, please, the timescales by which Parliament will have an oversight over the final treaty? Will the Minister also look again at injecting the voice of Chagossians into this process, even at this late stage, please? And can we also raise, please, the case of the Tamils stranded on Diego Garcia? We welcome recent news reports that they will now be airlifted to the UK, but will the Minister update the House on whether this will take place? and whether they will be permitted permanent right to resettlement in the UK. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman speaking for the Liberal Democrats for his questions. I know the future of the islands is hugely important to the Chagosian community. I've engaged with the Chagosian community over many, many years, and since I've been in government too. And we have always been clear, Mr. Speaker, on the importance of respecting their interests. I do have to say, though, that the negotiations were between the UK and Mauritius as the sovereign states, with our priority being to secure the full operation of the base on Diego Garcia. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is crucial that we recognise the importance of Chagosian interests within this process, and we have done. And I am confident that when the full deal is presented to Parliament, which it will do in due course, that there will be important provisions in there that I think will reassure members of the Chagosian community. And as I mentioned, some of them already have been made public in terms of the ability to visit, the ability to resettle on the outer islands, the UK citizenship guarantees, the trust fund, and of course the UK's own support, which is crucially important. And this comes on back of support for some time. He asked about the Sri Lankan migrants on Diego Garcia. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government inherited a deeply troubling situation which remained unresolved under the last administration for years after the migrants' arrival on Diego Garcia, resulting in mounting legal challenges. And we've been working at pace to find a solution that protects the welfare of the individuals and the integrity of British territorial borders. Due to the exceptional nature of the cases, the government has taken the decision to relocate a small number of the migrants to the UK, but this is subject to security checks. They will get a short period of permission to enter the UK when the individuals can consider their personal circumstances and next steps.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the wonderful things about our Parliament, our democracy, is that our citizens can see our proceedings, but so too can our foes. Those who wish us harm, those who have no good intentions toward us, will be looking across at the opposition benches, and they will be seeing that there is not a credible national security team when they're asking questions of this government. But I wanted to confine my question about a constituent of mine who has lived in the UK for the last 17 years after leaving the Chagos Islands. He is keen to reunite with his family who are now UK citizens, but housing costs are an issue. Will the Minister get back to me with information about whether housing support could be part of overall government support to the Chagosian community?
Deputy Speaker, well, I thank him for his question. Obviously, I don't know the full details of his individual constituent's case, but if he wants to write to me about that, I will, of course, come back to him in due course.
James Cleverly.
Can the Minister confirm or deny that the Right Honourable Member for Holborn and St Pancras had any unminuted conversations with Philippe Sands, KC, about the Mauritian claim over the Chagos Islands?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister engaged with the former Prime Minister of Mauritius. He engaged with the US administration over these matters. We've engaged with a wide range of partners in these discussions, and he, of course, is very familiar with them as the former Foreign Secretary who was part of that process.
John Slinger.
Speaker, I hope my honourable friend, the Minister, will agree with me that as we discuss the very important issues raised by the honourable member for Clacton, that we acknowledge that everyone, all honourable and right honourable members, are doing what is in the best interest of our country. Yeah. And indeed, that honourable and right honourable members opposite do not have a monopoly on national security and on defence. Yeah. And indeed, that it's this government that's reforming and improving our international reputation around the world. And our decision on the Chagos Islands, in protecting the base and the other issues that my honourable friend has mentioned, is an important part of this.
Yeah. Well, absolutely, Madam Deputy Speaker, the importance of national security to this government is the heart of the missions that the Prime Minister has set out, that have been put into practice by the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary, myself and others across government. We would never take decisions that compromise the national security of this country or indeed of our allies, and that's why I'm confident this decision is the right one. And let's remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, this was begun under the previous administration because they recognised the challenge and that something needed to be done about this.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Deputy Speaker, can I just say to the right honourable gentleman that surely now, given that the fact that the Mauritian government that he was dealing with has failed now and is no longer in power, isn't this now really a case of a deal with the wrong people at the wrong time for the wrong reasons, and it has abandoned the Chagosians? Chagosians have been very clear throughout, and it can't misrepresent the fact the vast majority wanted to go back but they also wanted to remain British citizens. And so now we have an incoming government in America, a new government in Mauritius. What is the point of continuing with this agreement? We should start again and recognise the Chagosians do not want to be Mauritian, but they want to have us give them their property back. Why don't we just do that and simplify the whole issue?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the right honourable gentleman knows that, of course, the national security interests of this country and indeed of our allies transcend administrations. We've just had an election. His former government started this process. We're the ones who got it done. And with regard to Mauritius, we welcome Dr Ramgoolin's election. I understand that he and his government are going to be sworn in over the next few days, and we look forward to working with them to take forward this agreement. He's a friend of the UK with deep professional and personal connections, having studied and worked here, and we're looking forward to working with him. And I would point out that his party in opposition also made clear that they in no way wanted to contend with the operation of our base on Diego Garcia. So we're looking forward to engaging with them in the days to come.
Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the spirit of cross-party working, I'm wondering if the Minister would like to take this moment to thank the previous Conservative government for starting negotiations on this important work. Because they realised then, even if they do not realise now, the importance of this for our country's national security.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his observation, and the right honourable gentleman, the former Foreign Secretary, appears to be on his way out. But you know, he recognised, as did many others in the previous administration, that we needed to secure a long-term basis for this base to meet the security needs of ourselves and our allies, and we need to put it on a sure legal footing. And we were the government that came in and got the deal done.
Deputy Speaker, does the Minister agree with me that the principal way to defend national security is to stand fast behind the international rules-based system? And does he further agree that the principal way to do that is to adhere to rulings of institutions like the International Court of Justice? Now, and furthermore, we've had a great deal of concern in this House in this urgent question about the sovereign democratic will of the Chagosians. So what mechanism will the UK government put in place to ensure that this House can have confidence that their sovereign ambitions as a people will be respected in this treaty and not simply sacrificed for convenience?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, he's absolutely right when it comes to international law and adherence to it, and this government is committed to the rule of law and international law, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get this deal done, to put that base on a secure legal footing, and our relationships with Mauritius and indeed other states. And there had been substantial criticism from other key partners around the world about our failure to come to a settlement on this, which was impacting on our interests. So he's absolutely right on that point. As I've said repeatedly on the Chagosians, I've engaged with them on many occasions. We will continue to engage with them. We'll continue to listen to the range of views that are in the community, which there are a huge number of, and we will continue to ensure that their interests are protected, which I'm confident this treaty does.
Mark Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know the Minister is a strong ally and supporter of all our overseas territories, as is this government. Will he take this moment now to restate this government's unconditional commitment to the right of the people of the Falklands and the peoples of Gibraltar to self-determine? And will he also confirm that we will continue to work closely with all of our overseas territories?
Well, I thank him, Madam Deputy Speaker, for his important question. I can absolutely confirm that, and not least in the actions of myself and my ministerial colleagues. My colleague, the Minister for the Armed Forces, was in the Falklands just in the last week, reiterating our absolute and robust commitment to their self-determination and sovereignty. I was in Gibraltar making the same point just a few weeks ago, and I was in 3 of our overseas territories last week making just the same commitments. So this government is committed to our overseas territories. I look forward to welcoming the leaders to the Joint Ministerial Council next week to say that in person.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister once again has come to this chamber and said that the last government started these negotiations. May I remind him that it was the last government that ended the negotiations because the Foreign Secretary did not agree with the advisory legal advice that was given This Foreign Secretary capitulated in 2 days. He has said that he will not reveal the cost of this deal because the government do not release costs related to overseas bases. But on the 14th of October, my honourable friend, the member for Huntingdon, asked the Minister for the Armed Forces a question regarding the total cost related to an overseas base in Kenya, to which the answer revealed the cost that this government was giving to that base. What's so different in this case?
Well, there's a very clear difference, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is that's a training area, not a major base, which I'm not going to the details of the operation on. And I'm surprised that he continues to ask for details on what is a hugely important base to our national security, and providing that information would put the security of that base at risk.
Joe Powell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know the Minister is a strong friend of our overseas territories. I wonder if he could outline the importance of putting the US base on a legal footing and give us a bit more detail about how that will enable us to work with our allies in terms of countering any potential Chinese threat in the region.
Well, it's a very important point that my honourable friend raises. It's been raised by honourable members in good faith on the other side, and indeed others who are looking at this. I am absolutely confident that when the detail of this treaty is provided, and of course at other technical levels to those at appropriate levels, we have clear commitments for robust security arrangements to deal with that challenge that he refers to, including preventing the presence of foreign security forces on the outer islands. And I reiterate again, Madam Deputy Speaker, we simply would not have countenanced a deal that in any way put our national security or that of our allies at risk.
Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Quite simply, do we have the unilateral right to extend, yes or no?
Minister.
I've made very clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have the right to extend the treaty beyond the 99-year period, and he'll be able to scrutinise the detail of that in due course.
Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's difficult to fathom concerns raised by the opposition about the consequences of governmental transition, as it was the former Conservative Foreign Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Braintree, who, when he was leading negotiations with Mauritius, that said our primary objective is to ensure the continued effective operation of our defence facility on Diego Garcia. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this government has now delivered that, and shouldn't the Conservatives be welcoming this?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I first thank him for his service for our country and its national security, and all of those in the House who've come in newly, who've served in our armed forces. He is absolutely right that we are protecting our national security, that we're putting things on a secure footing, and I completely agree with his comments.
Andrew Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Alexander Downer, former Australian Foreign Minister, former High Commissioner to this country and former UN Special Advisor on Cyprus, and a good friend of this country, says that surrender of the Chagos is symptomatic of a country that no longer has geopolitical perspective. What does the Minister say to Mr Downer's remarks, and does he agree furthermore with Mr Downer's comments that the last Labour government was prepared to capitulate on the two Cypriot sovereign base areas, Deucalion and Akrotiri? Who'd have thought? Isn't the Chagos surrender just same old Labour, strong on post-colonial guilt and weak on safety, security and stability?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to say I don't recognise those comments in the slightest, not least because we have made repeatedly clear our commitment to our overseas territories, to the Falklands, to Gibraltar, to the sovereign base areas in Cyprus, which he well knows are protected under the 1960 treaty. I have made statements to that effect. We are clear in our support for them, and they're important to us. The whole purpose is not to, handing something away. This is about Diego Garcia being on a secure footing, our military base, our presence being secure for the future.
Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The expulsion of the Chagosian people from both Diego Garcia and the archipelago was an act of wanton brutality by the British forces at the time. The Chagos Islanders have fought a doughty battle for more than 40 years in courts all over the world and the United Nations and in courts in this country, demanding their right to return. And all along, they've been determined to achieve that right, and they have, I think, deserve our congratulations on that. That right to return must be carried out, and international
Judicial systems have all shown it's quite clearly that it should be part of Mauritius. Therefore, the return of the islands to Mauritius is obviously the correct thing to do. Can the Minister assure me that in their right to return to the archipelago, Paros and the other islands, they will also have a right of some sort of presence, visit, or whatever to Diego Garcia itself? Because it is perfectly possible that these things could be arranged. And can I finally ask him not to descend down the road of rebuilding the British Empire, which is apparently what the Conservative Party and Reform want to do? We don't live in an age of empire. We live in an age of the right of people to be able to live their lives according to international law, and that is what's on offer.
Hear, hear.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question. You know, I've been very, very clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the way the UK removed Chagosians from the archipelago in the 1960s and 70s was wrong. I know that there is agreement across the House on this, and we're committed to building a relationship with the community built on respect and acknowledgement of the wrongs of the past. He asked a very technical question, and he is absolutely right that Chagosians will have the right to visit all the islands. He'll understand that given the sensitivity of the facilities on Diego Garcia, there are obviously some procedures in place around that, but there will be possible to have visits. We hope to be able to announce the scheme for that in due course next year. And most importantly, this treaty allows resettlement of the outer islands by Mauritius.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Clearly, further to my right honourable friend's question in relation to incoming administrations in Mauritius and the United States, clearly our allies in the United States are going to have real serious concerns about what the proposals are. Could the Minister therefore set out the position in terms of when the treaty is expected to be signed, and indeed whether this House will get the say over whether that treaty should be signed before it's cast into law?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, he'll be aware, as somebody who's been in the House a long time, of the procedures for dealing with treaties in this place. It will be signed, it will come through this place, and it will have the appropriate scrutiny. It's only right that it does so and that questions are asked. I am absolutely confident that when the full details of the treaty are provided, including to the incoming administration in the United States, they'll be absolutely confident that this meets US national security interests, it meets UK national security interests, and is in the mutual benefit of all parties involved.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So if the incoming President Trump administration confirm that they are against this dreadful deal, will the government stop negotiations and apologise to this House, or will they try and force it upon our most important international strategic partner?
Yeah. Answer. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, he will surely know the convention that we deal with one administration at a time. We have very positive and warm engagement with President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance's incoming administration. We look forward to discussing these matters with them, and we will engage with the United States in the usual way. We are absolutely clear that this treaty is in UK, US national security interests. It meets the security concerns, and it puts this base on a secure footing into the next century.
Anthony Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister explain why did the government rush into this deal so it could be completed just before the Mauritian election? And is it a proper thing for the British government to give diplomatic kudos to a party in a foreign election?
Madam Deputy Speaker, well, I completely reject those comments. The idea that we rushed into something when the previous government had spent over 2 years, multiple rounds of negotiations, preparing the basis for which we then got a deal done on, it's simply not a rush. That's us getting the job done and keeping our national security and our interests secure.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Minister, the answers perhaps this morning haven't been what we've really sought from you, so I asked this question in a different way. Does the Minister acknowledge the feelings of Chagosians as demonstrated in their peaceful protest to having their sovereignty stripped from them behind their backs? And does the Minister not believe that the deal struck with China for Hong Kong, as an example, which has not been respected, and that withdrawal has left Hong Kong people saying that they've been abandoned? That should serve as a warning. And will the Minister not rethink the decision and respect the wishes of the Chagosians?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the Honourable Gentleman knows I have great deal of respect for him on these matters and his care for people and human rights around the world. I am very, very clear that this treaty and the deal respects the rights and the interests of Chagosians. We've sought to put them at the heart of the arrangements. I've engaged with many Chagosians who, I have to say again, Madam Deputy Speaker, have a range of views. We've already heard that today in the House on this, and it's absolutely clear to me that we need to put their interests at the heart of the deal. We've done that. I'm confident that when they look at the detail of this, that they will see very, very positive outcomes for them and their communities, and we will provide that detail to the House in due course.
Thank you. That was the final question for that business. Points of order come after UQs and statements unless it is directly relevant to the UQ or statement. Is it directly relevant and urgent?
Yes, very much so. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Obviously, the issue of cost is of huge importance because it's public money, and we on this side think that the public should know what the cost is involved in this agreement. Now, the Minister said to my honourable friend for Hamble Valley, well, he said, first of all, that they don't give out the figure of the cost because they don't state the cost of overseas bases. My honourable friend for Hamble Valley pointed out that the Minister next to him pointed out that has stated the clear cost of the base in Kenya, and the Minister for the Foreign Office therefore said that's only a training base. But I can confirm to the House that back in November 22, James Heapy, then Minister for the Armed Forces, stated the cost to the then member for East Lothian for running the base in Akrotiri. That is not a training base at all. He gave 3 years' worth of figures. Madam Speaker, it is clearly not unprecedented. It's an extremely important point of public interest because it's public money. How else can we hold the government to account if they won't tell us what they're going to pay to rent back the base that we already own?
Well, no, that is not a matter for the Chair, but the honourable member has put his very robust point of order on the record. Yeah, we will now begin our second statement. For the Minister, Gareth Thomas.
Madam Deputy Speaker, with your permission, I wish to make a statement on the Post Office. The government inherited a post office that is simply not fit for purpose, following, frankly, disinterest from the last government, a toxic culture in head office, and years of underinvestment. Our top priority remains to deliver redress to those affected by the Horizon scandal. This government has already taken significant steps to increase the payment of redress. It has nearly doubled under this government. Let me be clear with the House, though. There are still complex cases to resolve, and we have identified gaps in the compensation process. But we are beginning to make progress. As of the 31st of October, £438 million has been paid to over 3,100 claimants. We also, in July, launched the new Horizon Convictions Redress Scheme for victims whose convictions were overturned by legislation. And we have announced our intention to set up an appeal system for the much criticised Horizon Shortfall Scheme. We were clear in our manifesto that we will work to strengthen the Post Office network in consultation with postmasters, trade unions and customers. The Post Office network provides critical services valued by communities across the whole of the UK. Their essential services go beyond post. They provide access to cash, banking and other financial services too. This government recognises in particular that access to cash remains important to millions across the UK. Through its network of 11,500 branches across the UK, Post Office continues to provide vital banking services through the banking framework to communities and businesses alike and protect access to cash. I know how highly this House rightly values postmasters and what they provide day in and day out to the communities they serve. But we have to recognise that the Post Office is far from perfect. We have seen this from evidence given at the inquiry. It's clear there needs to be significant cultural change at the Post Office to ensure it genuinely prioritises the needs of postmasters and delivers customers' needs far into the future. It's also clear more needs to be done to rebuild trust within the business and with the public who depend on their services. It's no secret too that the business is facing commercial challenges. Nearly half of its branches are not profitable or only make a small profit from the Post Office business. Postmaster pay hasn't increased materially for a decade, The company has a high cost base and needs to transform its IT system. Earlier today, Nigel Railton set out his ambition for the future of the Post Office in his role as chair. Postmasters have to be placed front and centre of the Post Office, and we agree that the culture of the Post Office headquarters in particular needs to change fundamentally to deliver that. As part of this, the Post Office plans to reduce central costs and look seriously at other ways to deliver efficiencies, which should enable real-term increases in postmaster pay. Mr Railton's ambitions are for a new deal for postmasters that puts postmasters at the heart of the Post Office. There will be stronger postmaster engagement in the running of the business. As part of this, a new postmaster panel will be established to enable current postmasters to work with the company to improve the support and training provided to postmasters. The Post Office will also set up a new consultative council. It will work with the Post Office senior management on how these new plans are taken forward to provide genuine challenge and maintain focus on the needs of postmasters. Mr Railton's plan seeks to make changes to the business with the ambition of significantly increasing postmaster remuneration, and it sets out an intention to transform the service and support postmasters receive from the Post Office. No decisions to close any or all of the remaining directly managed branches have been taken. The Post Office will continue to deliver on the 11,500 minimum branches requirement set by government. We have made clear to the Post Office that we expect them to consult with postmasters, trade unions and other stakeholders before any individual decisions are taken. Aspects of the plan are also subject to government funding and outcomes of the upcoming spending review. Lastly, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have already set out our plan to publish a green paper to consult with the public on the long-term future of the Post Office, not least how it should be governed after a decade of decline. Doing nothing at the Post Office is simply not an option. There is more work to be done, but there has to be change, and I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Minister, Andrew Griffiths.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his statement and for sharing an advance copy with me. Let me add on this side of the House that the victims of the Horizon IT scandal deserve full redress. I welcome the efforts to hasten the rollout of the payments being made, building on the work of my excellent friend, the Honourable Member for Thirsk and Malton. I know we were promised an update on that particular matter by the government in mid-November. I'm not sure if that was what he was doing today, but please can he undertake to give this House regular updates on such an important matter. We also welcome the increased focus on postmasters. That is absolutely right. It is, however, with regret that we learn today the Post Office feels they've no choice but to begin the process of making radical decisions to reduce costs. And how has this come about? Well, in common with many other town centre enterprises, the Post Office costs are skyrocketing. Business rates are going up, national insurance contributions are going up, the threshold at which national insurance becomes payable are going down, their obligations around the minimum wage are going up. There is a direct line of sight connecting today's announcement and the Chancellor's budget, yet the Minister did not mention that in his statement once. The Chairman of the Post Office himself said in his speech this morning that these changes have made business more difficult for Post Office branches, something for honourable members on the benches opposite to consider. Can the Minister guarantee the budget had no impact on this decision? Or since that isn't the case, does he acknowledge that this was the inevitable consequence of the burdens his government are placing on businesses large and small? Can the Minister tell us when he first knew of these plans set out by the Post Office today and whether he himself approved the Chairman's statement? As the Post Office Chairman noted, he made clear that these plans are subject to government funding. So can the Minister commit from the dispatch box today that that funding will indeed be coming and we don't face 6 months of uncertainty whilst those negotiations continue? And did his government do an impact assessment to determine the cost of the budget measures on the Post Office and other local services? If they did that impact assessment, will they publish it? And if not, why not? Were they worried about the result and that they would not like that? The measures in his government's budget were clearly now, and we see here today, a jobs tax. After today's impact, 100 high streets. Will he go back to the Chancellor and ask her to nix the nix increase? Madam Deputy Speaker, this news is yet another pasting in the onslaught for many rural communities. Thousands of our constituents in communities up and down the country will be waiting in trepidation today to discover the fate of their local post office. Those who rely on the post office are often the most vulnerable in society. What guarantees can the Minister provide that, unlike the family farm tax, this is not a further assault on rural communities from this government? It was under the last government that we entered into a new partnership with the Post Office to help millions of people access government services and support online, enabling them to visit a post office to confirm their identity in person. That guaranteed access to those without the internet that they would not be left behind. Can the Minister confirm that no withdrawal of government services currently provided through the Post Office will take place? Madam Deputy Speaker, for many, post offices also provide valuable, vital banking services. I'm proud of the role the last government undertook to launch banking hubs across the country, and it was a privilege to watch the focus from my right honourable friend, the member for West Worcestershire, working in the Treasury Committee to drive that forward, that lifeline for communities from Saltash to Kilkeel. It was encouraging to read in Nigel Relton's speech this morning the Post Office have committed to a significant increase in the number of banking hubs to 500 by 2030. We welcome that. However, the devil is in the detail, especially where this government is concerned. Has the Minister engaged with colleagues in the Treasury to discuss the impact of today's news on the banking framework negotiations, which are essential to underwrite that rollout of banking hubs? And what support will the government offer to secure the future of more banking hubs in areas that need them most? Madam Deputy Speaker, despite the fact that no one around the Cabinet table has ever set up a business, I would have thought it would be obvious that if you place unaccountable burdens on business, you push up the cost of wages and employment, you introduce a jobs tax, that this would be the consequence. Yet that is exactly what this government has tried to do, and here we are, no less than 2 weeks later, our high streets are facing the devastating consequences of the government's decisions.
Well, I'm grateful to the Shadow Minister for some of his comments. I'm happy to confirm that I will keep the House updated on work around the future of the Post Office, as well as, even more importantly, on the work to ensure that all those sub-postmasters who were the victims of the Horizon scandal get full and fair redress. And on that point, I should say at the outset that I have met a series of sub-postmasters who were victims of the Horizon scandal. Each of them have certainly left their mark on me in terms of their stories will stay with me for a very long time, and I'm sure I speak in that regard for the whole House for the conversations that they've had with individual sub-postmasters in their constituencies, and I'm therefore acutely aware of my responsibility and the government's responsibility more generally to follow through on our commitment to speed up redress. So I can say to the House that the number of cases that have been settled with full and fair compensation have nearly doubled in the 4 months since we came into government compared to the 4 months before. And we have taken a series of additional steps to try and make it easier for sub-postmasters who were the victims of the scandal to get full and fair redress quickly, not least fix some payments for those applying under the Horizon Shortfall Scheme, and similarly fix some payments under the Horizon Convictions Redress Scheme, which we launched back in July. On his wider points about the budget and its impact on the High Street, it did rather sound like he was replaying his lines from the budget speech last week, and I gently say to him that I recall him being the right-hand man of Kwasi Kwarteng, who helped to do huge damage to businesses up and down our country, helped to drive interest rates up to a record high, for some 16 years. So I gently suggest to him that he will have some more work to do to be convincing on support for businesses going forward. There is one other issue in terms of the impact on the high street, which I hope that he will be willing to take responsibility for going forward. In the last 14 years, over 9,500 bank branches closed. This has a considerable impact on the future of the high street. Our plans with Nigel Railton to improve banking services, to roll out banking hubs, I hope will make a significant difference going forward. And on the budget more generally, I gently say to him, given the mess that his party had left the country in terms of the country's finances, given the lack of money that had been set aside for Horizon compensation, I do think he should be a little bit more honest in the House about his responsibility for the scale of the mess that we inherited.
This is the Trade Select Committee Chair, Liam Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today is the last day of the Horizon inquiry, and I look forward to working with you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and with colleagues across the whole House to explore what sanctions are appropriate for those who clearly misled us as this scandal unfolded. I look forward to seeing the Minister and the Justice Minister on Tuesday in front of the committee to explore how we make redress payments faster. But can I ask him now, it is surely right that we try and grow the top line of post office businesses, and that's got to mean that high street banks should be contributing more to that core business. What steps can he take in order to ensure that happens?
Well, I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for his question, and I welcome the fact that the first act of his committee was to look at the issue of redress for sub-postmasters who are victims of the Horizon scandal, and will happily appear next week to talk through where we are at in terms of compensation payments. But he's absolutely right to say that one of the bright spots in terms of the future of the post office and the continuing commitment of its sub-postmasters, I think, is the brightest spot of the post office at the moment, is around banking. And there is quite clearly more that the post office could offer, with the right support from the financial services industry, to people on our high streets through banking hubs and directly through the post office. So we will work with the post office in that regard. I think there is a particular responsibility on the banks, given how many bank branches have closed, to work with the post office in a very constructive manner to improve the banking offer on the high street going forward.
Spokesperson Sarah Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also thank the Minister for his statement. Post office branches across the UK play a vital part in our local communities and high streets, with millions of people depending on them, especially in some of the more rural areas of the South West, like constituencies that I represent. News that these 115 branches and around 1,000 jobs could be at risk is extremely concerning, and I'm pleased to hear some of the Minister's reassurance on this. There is no doubt that the organisation needs a reform, but local communities cannot be left without the essential services post offices offer, especially as we see high street banks disappearing. The government must guarantee that the local services and the post office jobs are protected. We also urge that the government take action to set the post office on a sustainable footing for the long term. The Liberal Democrats have put forward a proposal for mutualisation of the post office, which would give sub-postmasters more independence and control. And we should be encouraging post offices to play a more active role in our local economies.